You have found yourself on another episode of Locked On Bulls. On today's episode, of course, we'll be previewing the game against the Milwaukee Bucks. We'll be talking about what role players need to step up to help this team find success against one of the better teams in the NBA. And then last, we'll talk about how the Bulls' strength of schedule has played in part to that slow start the Bulls have had. We'll get into all that and more right after this.
You are Locked On Bulls, your daily podcast on the Chicago Bulls, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thank you for tuning in to Locked On Bulls, member of the Locked On Podcast Network, where it's your team every day. I'm Haize, host and creator of Chicago Bulls and Chicago Bears Central, and here we're talking about our Chicago Bulls, and the Bulls have a big test in front of them as they face the Milwaukee Bucks today. The Milwaukee Bucks that are the second team in the Eastern Conference right now after the Boston Celtics, who the Bulls just defeated in our last game. The Bulls have a big test against the Milwaukee Bucks. This is not a team that they want to overlook in any stretch of the imagination, and one of the biggest things that have played a part into the Milwaukee Bucks' success outside of their efficiency is the way that they rebound the ball. And that's one of the first things that we're going to talk about. One of the first keys for the Chicago Bulls against the Milwaukee Bucks is the rebounding battle. The Milwaukee Bucks are the best rebounding team in the NBA at this point in the season, averaging almost 50 rebounds per game. Now, the Bulls do average about 45 and a half rebounds per game. So they're going to have to come in, and the rebounding is going to be one of the biggest stories of the game. And the reason why we're starting with that, we're not starting with scoring, we're not starting with Zach, we're not starting with DeMar, is because I think this is a thing that we saw the team have success in against the Boston Celtics, that just it allowed them to push the pace more. It allowed them to kind of dictate the tone. When you have Drummond and Nikola Vucevic, both players that are averaging double-digit rebounds or near double-digit rebounds, because I think Drummond has fallen a little bit under double digits. But outside of that, it's going to be important for this team to rebound the ball well and efficiently. One of the things that we had against the Boston Celtics is every player that checked into that game registered at least one rebound outside of Goran Dragic, and that is what we're going to need from this team again, is to just rebound the battle. That's going to allow the Bulls to have more opportunities to shoot. It's going to allow them to get out in transition. It's going to allow them to do a lot of the things that have made them have success in this early part of the season when they have found it. Now, so, that's going to be one of the key things with this Bulls team, how they rebound the ball outside of just Drummond and Vooch. We know what we can bet on with Drummond and Vooch. We know we're getting 10, 11, 12 rebounds from them each over the course of the game, but that's going to be one of the things. And as we're staying on rebounding and Andre Drummond and Nikola Vucevic, that's the next player that we're going to go to. Vooch has to be locked in on both sides of the ball. Now, I'm not expecting Nikola Vucevic to have one of those big performance games where he scores 20 plus points or anything like that, because it's always going to be Bobby Portis or Brook Lopez out there, and Vooch is going to have to expound a lot of energy on the defensive end. We need to see Vooch can't allow, like he did against Valanciunas, to really cook against him, because this is two players in Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis that absolutely could do that. And Bobby Portis having a hell of a season is he so far for the Milwaukee Bucks. The Vooch is going to have to be locked in and giving that effort defensively. This is going to probably be and needs to be one of those games in which Vooch may not score, like I said, the 20 points. We may only see 11, 12, 13, 14 points from Nikola Vucevic, but he's going to have a big rebounding night, maybe a block or two in this game. He's played pretty well against the Milwaukee Bucks since he's come to the Chicago Bulls. We're going to need Vooch to be locked in this game, because if he allows Brook Lopez and Bobby Portis to really go off, and that's going to, overall, the center matchup is one of the matchups I'm going to be looking for the most. The center and the point guard matchup, which we'll talk about here in a second, is that center matchup, because when you look at Vooch and Drummond, Lopez and Portis, it's going to be important that we keep that pressure on, that we keep them off the boards, that we keep two players that definitely can get going and be very big parts of this Milwaukee Bucks success. We're going to have to keep them from having those games, specifically Bobby Portis. Looking at how Vooch does in his minutes against Portis, looking how Drummond does in his matchup against Portis, and don't be surprised if this Bucks team does try to go big against the Chicago Bulls, knowing that size is our disadvantage for this team. They may even throw some Serge Ibaka out there, who's playing about 11 minutes per game for the Milwaukee Bucks and when he checks in. But you look at the size that this Milwaukee Bucks team does have, the size discrepancy that the Bulls have, especially once they go to the bench outside of Drummond, it can get big. But, Derrick Jones Jr. has had some success against the Milwaukee Bucks since he's been a Chicago Bull, so he's going to probably also be a big part of this. But we're going to need those games from our bigs, and Patrick Williams, especially, Patrick Williams getting the Giannis guard there. So the thing with Patrick, and we'll talk about the role players here in the next segment, but, the rebounding and what Vooch can do, what Drummond can do is going to be drastically important. But on top of that, let's talk about the two players that are the two best players on this team, and that's Zach LaVine and DeMar DeRozan. I do expect the Milwaukee Bucks to try to implement a very similar defensive plan that the Toronto Raptors did against DeMar DeRozan to kind of nullify him and get him out the game. The Bulls are going to have to attack that team early. They're going to have to attack before the Bucks get a chance to set up on the defensive end, and they're going to have to move the ball around intentionally, right, and keep those turnovers down. This is a team in which if the Bulls have the high number of turnovers that we've seen this team have at other times in this season, this game can get ugly quick. It can get away from the Bulls quick, especially if the Bucks get hot shooting. You want to eliminate that if you can for the Chicago Bulls, but again, look for them to try to completely take DeMar DeRozan out of this game if they can. There's probably always going to be – it's going to be interesting to see what the Bucks do as far as defensively, because they could try to put Giannis on DeMar DeRozan, let Pat Connaughton guard Patrick Williams, because that's probably even though there's some size discrepancy there, Patrick Williams isn't the threat to go off, but as well as Zach LaVine and Grayson Allen. As much as we hate Grayson Allen here in Chicago, he is a player that is solid defensively, and so Zach LaVine is going to have to try to make them pay and be locked in, much like he was in that Boston Celtics game. And if we see a game from Zach LaVine in which he has, and he didn't shoot the best against the Celtics, but if we see Zach LaVine have the type of game where he's taken out of the game, he's not focused, he's shooting the ball inefficiently, he's not playing on the defensive end, this can be an ugly game for the Chicago Bulls, absolutely. Now, the thing that also helps the Chicago Bulls is the Milwaukee Bucks are actually as far as percentage-wise, one of the worst shooting teams in the NBA, averaging 44.9 at field goal percentage. They average 37% from the three-point range, which is higher in the NBA than that. But the Bulls are going to have to try to force them to shoot the ball bad. They're going to have to play defense. A full 4 quarters of defensive intensity are we going to need from the Chicago Bulls against the Milwaukee Bucks? Because I tell you, right, the Milwaukee Bucks are a susceptible team. Yes, they have a great record, but when you look at the things that the Bulls can do, especially if they're locked in defensively, that's going to be important. And Zach LaVine doing and trying to mimic, well, not really trying to mimic, but having that same impact that he had against the Boston Celtics, where he was passing when his shot wasn't falling. He got rebounds. He got out on transition. He pushed the pace. That's going to be hugely important for the Chicago Bulls team as well. So you got to look for our big three in Vooch, DeMar, and Zach to really kind of set that tone. And we're going to talk about the role players, like I said, here in the second segment, but it's just going to be important for the Bulls to do that. It's going to be important for the Bulls to not allow the Milwaukee Bucks to get out to a big first quarter as well. One of the things that we saw against the Boston Celtics is the Bulls did not allow that. That's when the Bulls are at their best, when they're playing locked in on both sides of the ball. They're going to have to do that. We're going to have big contributions in different ways from the Chicago Bulls team. This is going to be a game to see how DeMar does react if they do put Giannis on him, if they do, at times have Grayson Allen on him, things like that, as they keep the defensive pressure on DeMar DeRozan. Because if DeMar gets frustrated, if DeMar has an inefficient night, this Bulls team is going to have to trust their role players. And that's one of the things that happened in that Boston Celtics game, is that the role players stepped up and hit big shots, and we're going to have another night like that from them. But this big three is going to have to come in, play their roles well. Hopefully Zach LaVine can shoot the ball efficiently, and we saw a more aggressive Zach, but also a more focused Zach against the Boston Celtics. We need all of that against the Milwaukee Bucks as the Bulls try to keep up this positive momentum that they've had, or that they showed in that Boston Celtics game. As they look to correct some things, we're going to need that from the Chicago Bulls team. Can they do it? Again, Vooch attacking when he does have mismatches. The Bulls have to stop missing Nikola Vucevic when he does have mismatches, and Andre Drummond to that point as well. We're going to need to see that defensive intensity. We're going to need to see the players locked in. We're going to need to see them try to get some steals and turnovers, and also play more discipline, not foul as much, right? Not get frustrated by the refs. Do not allow the refs to take you out this game, because You have a team in front of you that's going to play you hard and difficult, and that has a lot of length on that team. And we've seen when teams have a lot of length, especially for the Chicago Bulls that do play smaller, it does affect the Bulls. And so if they can play with that concerned effort, and Billy Donovan and that coaching staff have a scheme to attack once they try to do some things defensively, especially if you don't allow that team to set up defensively, we can definitely see the Chicago Bulls team has some success against the Boston Celtics. It's not going to be easy, not trying to make it seem like it's going to be easy, but I do think this Bulls team has the ability to do it, and a big part of that is going to be how the role players play, which we're going to talk about next. But first, I got to talk to you guys about Turo. Turo is the world's largest car-sharing marketplace. With Turo, you can book any car you want, wherever you want it, from a community of local hosts. Browse a huge selection of vehicles for just about any occasion or budget across the U.S., U.K., Canada, and coming soon to Australia. Book a spacious SUV or minivan for a family trip. Get a classic or luxury car for a special event, birthday, or holiday. Find affordable economy cars if you're on a budget and just need to get from A to B. Test drive the new electric vehicle you've had your eye on and want to see how it fits in your everyday life. Many Turo hosts can even deliver the car right to you. Every trip is backed by liability insurance. Terms and conditions and exclusions apply. Forget boring rental cars and 5-year drive at Turo.com. All right, we also want to thank you for making Locked On Bulls your first listen today. For your second listen, check on Locked On Sports today. From the games that matter the most to the biggest stories in sports, go beyond the scoreboard and behind the scenes with local experts and insights only Locked On can provide. Locked On Sports today, available on this app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. All right, Bulls fans. So one of the things that I did talk about and I just mentioned is the importance of this team and the role players on this team. And I'm going to start off with two that they're still role players in that I look at it by the definition of role players, and that's Patrick Williams and Ayo Dosunmu. We saw both of these players have pretty good games against the Boston Celtics in different ways. And the one I'm going to start off with first is Ayo Dosunmu. The reason why, when you see Ayo pushing the pace, and Zach LaVine did it too as well, right? I don't want to, overlook Zach LaVine's and how he pushed the pace, especially to start that game against the Boston Celtics. But outside of that, it was really Ayo Dosunmu, actually the point guardsmanship of Ayo Dosunmu growing, right? While he doesn't have a lot of the offense ran through him, while he doesn't get a huge number of assists, what Ayo is growing into is a point guard that can push that pace. His ability to get to the rim, seeing that growth in there. His three-point shooting has also grown a lot from last season and this season, but that ability to push the pace, that ability to get to the rim, that newfound kind of confidence that he has in finishing around the rim, that's going to be important for Ayo. As we talk about this Boston Celtics team, this Milwaukee Bucks team, and their length and the way that they can use some size to kind of disrupt this Chicago Bulls offense, they're going to have to push the pace when they get rebounds. They're going to have to push the pace when they get steals. They're going to have to push the pace like that. And Ayo Dosunmu was a very big part of that. Seeing his growth, seeing his decision-making, seeing like his confidence in putting the ball on the floor and taking players off the dribble. Ayo Dosunmu's been compared a lot to Jrue Holiday. And as I've said before, if you guys have followed this program a lot, I believe in those comparisons more and more every day that goes by. I really, truly do, because it's there, right? If Ayo can also own that defensive matchup, right? I'm not necessarily saying shut a Jrue Holiday down, but if Ayo can make Jrue Holiday have to play on both sides of the ball, right, and disrupt some of the things that he does defensively, that Jrue Holiday does offensively, if Ayo can do that on the defensive end, it's going to help this Bulls team a lot. The point of attack defense, that kind of has to start with Ayo Dosunmu in this game, and I hope that he can do that, because if you can take Jrue Holiday and his shooting ability kind of out of this game, it's going to bode well for the Chicago Bulls. So I'm looking at that matchup of Ayo Dosunmu on both sides of the ball. If he can do the things that we've slowly started seeing him do, he started off the season doing it, but we see him do when this Bulls team is rocking and rolling. That's really going to change the outlook of this game a lot, and it's going to allow the Milwaukee Bucks to not rest in I think they're going to want to defend DeMar DeRozan, right? They cannot try to guard DeMar, take him out the game, trap him and not allow him to really get the ball, guard Zach LaVine closely, and then they kind of just expect see what the role players can do. Ayo Dosunmu and that confidence building in him, he's going to be hugely important for the Bulls' success, I think, in this game. But outside of Ayo, Also, Patrick Williams. We saw Patrick Williams have one of his better games on both sides of the ball last game against the Boston Celtics. And considering he's going to be drawing that Giannis matchup in this game, and nobody expects Patrick Williams or any player for that matter to be able to shut Giannis down, Patrick Williams is going to have to play solidly on defense. And if they sag off on him on offense like the Boston Celtics did, like I said, I kind of think that this team, that the Milwaukee Bucks may try to put Giannis, maybe not the whole game, but especially at times against DeMar DeRozan. And if they do that, if they move Pat Connaughton to guarding Patrick Williams has to own that matchup. He has to make them pay. If they sag off on him on the three-point line, Patrick Williams is going to have to do what he did last game against the Boston Celtics. He's going to have to not hesitate in shooting that ball. And just playing well, right? And so, especially with Chris Middleton out, we'll see what lineups the Milwaukee Bucks throw at this team. Jordan Nwora is another one that they could do. If I think I said that name right. Wesley Matthews is another one as well. Whatever they try to do with this lineup, if they do try to sag off Patrick Williams, if they do say, hey, we're going to let Pat shoot. And I think the league is starting to hopefully wake up to the fact that, listen, Patrick Williams on the season, I think, is shooting the ball almost 50% from three-point. I know he is in the month of November. Patrick Williams has had a hell of a month of November, just really performing well for the Chicago Bulls, shooting the ball well. Probably one of the best stretches shooting of Patrick Williams' season, of his career. So far for the month of November, Patrick Williams, as I get the stats up and stall, for the month of November right now, Patrick Williams is averaging 11.4 points per game, 5 rebounds per game, 1 assist, 1.5 blocks, and a half a steal per game. Only 2.1 fouls as well, but he's shooting the ball 51% from the field and 45% from three-point range is Patrick Williams in the month of November. If he can continue to do that, if he continue to build on that and make teams pay for not guarding him, right? Or taking his three-point shooting for granted, sagging off on him, that really does change the outlook of this game for the Chicago Bulls. And I do think Pat can do that, right? We need Pat to continue to step up and be that two-way player that he's really turning himself into. Patrick Williams, his growth and his confidence building over the course of the season has been one of the best things to watch about the Chicago Bulls team, especially as it just started off in a very bad place for P. Will as the season started. So, as we see that growth and development from him, we need that in this game. We need him to own the defensive matchup. We need him to play solid defensively, especially because they're going to try to switch some things as well. This is a Milwaukee Bucks team that tries to force switches a lot. Patrick Williams is going to have to play well in that. The first two role players that I wanted to start off with was Ayo Dosunmu and Patrick Williams, not only because they're in that starting lineup, because they're the young future of this team, and they've been putting together some solid performances for the Chicago Bulls, even with the Bulls the Chicago Bulls underperforming in the last handful of games. We're going to need Ayo Dosunmu and Patrick Williams to really step up in this game against the Milwaukee Bucks. If they can play well in those matchups, if they can score the ball well as well, give this team a little bit relief on that offensive side of the ball, as well as what we know both these players can bring defensively, it's going to be very good for this team in this game against the Milwaukee Bucks. But outside of them, let's go to the bench, right? Goran Dragic is listed as day-to-day. He's probable for the game tonight. So if he does play, we already know what Goran brings, like his play, his passing, the playmaking ability that he has, the ability to shoot the ball could be huge in this game. But I'm looking at this bench overall, right? One of the best things about the Chicago Bulls bench is just when they're on and rocking, how they can dictate the pace, how they can push the pace, how they can change the energy of this game. Alex Caruso has been shooting the ball a little bit better over the course of the last few games with horrendous shooting to start the season. We're also looking at Alex Caruso to really have a big impact in this game if he can shoot the ball well. But outside of that, what he brings defensively is definitely going to be needed in this game. But if we get Alex Caruso that's also shooting the ball pretty solidly, it really does help this Bulls team just look that much better. So we definitely need that from him as well. Coby White, who stepped up when Goran Dragic went out, made some really good passes in that game once Goran did go down to Coby White in his minutes. We still haven't seen Coby White really shoot the ball too well this season. He's actually having one of the worst shooting starts to his career. So we want to see Coby White come in, if his shot isn't falling, to do some of the other things that he does. The passing has taken a leap. I actually want to see as well as Kobe White take players off the dribble a little bit more and try to go to the lane a little bit more. We're seeing him have some success in that. But outside of Kobe White, Javonte Green and Derrick Jones Jr., this is going to be a game in which they do try to take advantage of both these players because of the size that the Milwaukee Bucks can throw at the Bulls all time. Derrick Jones Jr. has had some pretty solid play against the Bucks at times since he's become a Chicago Bulls, but we already know that Javonte and the energy that he brings defensively, offensively, in transition, the deflections that he and Alex Caruso and Andre Drummond get to help this team get out in transition are going to be important in this game. We're going to need to have a big impact from our bench, especially on that defensive end, as the bench really has set the defensive tone, I think, more often than not in these games. We're going to need every bit of that against the Milwaukee Bucks if this team can do it. I'm looking at Javonte Green, that energy, really to kind of come in defensively and do some things, of course, in transition. Derrick Jones Jr., who's done some pretty solid jobs defending players bigger than him at times and really bringing some of that weak side defense. We're going to need that big time from them. But when you look at the bench, Alex Caruso, Javonte, Derrick Jones Jr., Goran, and Andre Drummond, and chipping Kobe White in there playing some spot minutes as well, or a lot of minutes if Goran is out. We're going to need that group of players when they're in, no matter what lineup rotation they're in. We're going to need that big time for the Chicago Bulls team to have success against the Milwaukee Bucks and the coaching staff as well. We need to see another very well coached game by Billy Donovan and the coaching staff to have some success against the Milwaukee Bucks. But that's it. Next up, we're going to be talking about the Bulls' strength of schedule so far and how that has played a part in the Chicago Bulls not necessarily having the start of the season that we would have hoped that they were going to have in the season so far. But first, I got to talk to you guys about BetOnline. BetOnline.net is your number one source for your sports betting info, stats, news, and analysis. Get the latest odds and trends for every professional and amateur league out there. From football to basketball to soccer to esports, we've got it all covered at BetOnline.net. And if you love sports podcasts, you can find those as well at BetOnline. We are always the fastest and easiest way to get your betting fix. Head to the website today or use your mobile device to learn more. BetOnline is where the game starts. All right, Bulls fans. So before we wrap it up today, I want to talk about the Bulls' strength of schedule and how that's played a part in the slow start for the Chicago Bulls. And some of the surprising things for the Chicago Bulls, ESPN predicted the Bulls to have 8 wins over the course of their first 17 games. The Bulls actually had 7, so they've underperformed a little bit on that. But the Bulls have had the second strongest strength of schedule so far this season, second only to the Philadelphia 76ers that are also 8-8 on the season. Right? They're 8-8 on the season, so the strength of schedule has definitely affected the Philadelphia 76ers as well. But the Chicago Bulls, their opponents so far have a combined win percentage of 52%, meaning they're over 500, right? And surprisingly enough, the Bulls have fared better. They're 5-6 against teams with winning records. So, they fared a little bit better. The thing that's surprising about this is that the Bulls have actually played worse against the matchups that have been expected to be easy for the Chicago Bulls. And that's probably one of the most concerning things, right? Is that the Bulls playing down to the level of competition. The Bulls aren't a good enough team and have not shown themselves to be a good enough team so far this season to play down to any level of competition. So we need to see the Chicago Bulls, and the strength of schedule is going to ease up. We know we have this road stretch that is tough as well. It eases up a little bit after that. But the Bulls have, surprisingly enough, played better against the better competition in the league. And that's what's been so really perplexing about this team, right? Of course, 2 of their 7 wins coming against the Milwaukee Bucks, which is weird. Milwaukee Bucks against the Boston Celtics. But the way that this team has performed, the way that this team has, not handled the strength of schedule too well, it does, the fact that some relief may be coming in that it makes you look maybe a little bit more hopeful when you see this team play the way that they did, like I said, against that second game against the Toronto Raptors, against the last game against the Boston Celtics. If this team can continue to do those things, if this team can continue that level of play, against the better competition in the league, and really start building some chemistry, build a style of play. I've really called for the Bulls to keep that style of play that they had in that second Toronto Raptors game, similar to what they did in the game against the Boston Celtics. They have to be a team that pushes the pace. And while strength of schedule can only, I think, be blamed so much. Yes, we've had a lot of back-to-backs. Yes, we've had the rest disadvantage a lot so far at this young part of the season. If you watch the Chicago Bulls play, you know that they really put themselves in holes by the lack of intensity, by the lack of focus on the defensive end, by the turnovers that they've done. A lot of the problems for the Chicago Bulls so far this season are, whether we want to admit it or not, are in the Bulls' control. So we have to see this team play better. The strength of schedule has definitely played a part, right? I don't want to see, but the fact that teams that seem right now to be lottery bound, the Chicago Bulls are 2-4 against projected lottery teams. If they can up that play, right? And we know the Bulls have been close in a lot of these games. If that 4-2 is switched, and they're 2-4 is switched, and they're 4-2 against lottery teams, that changes the almost the whole outlook of this season and where we see the Chicago Bulls being at right now. So, I want to see this team, of course, play better against the worst teams, but I do think that at least a little bit, right? While, yes, the season has still been disappointing, not excusing the season at all, it gives you a little bit of confidence, the fact that the Bulls have played better teams, much better than people have expected. The Bulls right now are 5-6 against playoff teams from last season. And 8 of their 17 matchups thus far, have been against really solid teams. So you want to see the Chicago Bulls start upping that, start playing better. And the strength of schedule, while it's not this big excuse, right? Because every team goes through tough stretches. Everything goes through a game of a week of back-to-backs or whatever, things like that. This Chicago Bulls team, as perplexing as it has been, has showed a lot of really good flashes that we want to see turn into sustained play. Now, hopefully we have not seen that as of yet, but hopefully we do start to see that. And as this team starts to level out, hopefully they build some resiliency over this road stretch. Hopefully they bond together a little bit more. Hopefully they develop kind of an identity and play style over this road stretch. I've said it before. Road stretches for teams, especially long road stretches, they can either bust pipes or they can make diamonds. And hopefully we see this team come out of this road stretch as a diamond. So to say, and it really turns their season around, so to say, is what I'll say. Let me know what you guys think on that one down below. But that is it for today's episode of Locked On Bulls. You can follow me at CEO Haize. Even though he's not here, you can follow my co-host Pat at Pat the Designer on every social media platform as well. You can follow us collectively at Locked On Bulls on every social media platform. Before we go, though, I want to thank you guys for making Locked On Bulls your first listen every day. For your second listen, go and check on Locked On Sports Today, the biggest stories of the day, plus instant reactions, big game recaps, and the take of the day. Available on the Odyssey app, YouTube, or wherever you get your podcasts. For Pat the Designer, I'm Haize. This is Locked On Bulls. We out. See you guys tonight after the game. Peace, y'all.